1 o'clock rock with Angel Yanagihara. Thank you so much for coming down.
My pleasure.
Great to have you here. Angel is a joint appointment, I guess, in SOWEST, the School of Ocean, Earth Science and Technology, which is our customary guest source for this, and specifically HIGP also, by the way. But she's also a JAPSOM, which makes her very interesting. Welcome to the show. We're going to explore all of that.
Thank you. Thank you.
And this is, of course, research in Manoa, and we're talking about out of the box with box jellyfish.
Oh, great title. Thank you.
How in the world did you get to be a jellyfish scientist?
Well, it certainly wasn't my plan. I started out as a PhD candidate at Georgetown University in my 20s, and I went through the program and was just about to finish up, and I got married to a someone from Hawaii.
Yanagihara. Wonderful name, by the way.
Wonderful name, yes. And we had a surprise, a special needs baby. So I ended up taking a leave of absence, and we moved here in the meantime. So I finished my PhD program at UH Manoa, and another 2 years of work on top of the work I'd done in Georgetown. And just before walking in the summer of 1997 to get the PhD dissertation graduation, I went for a morning swim at 6 a.m. And there were, unfortunately...
I think I'm going to love this story. Sorry.
Unfortunately, there were these little clear blobs on the beach. And an older lady was walking the beach, and she pointed them out, and she said, "You should not swim today. These are very dangerous. They're box jellyfish." I'd never heard of box jellyfish. I looked at them, and I thought, this can't possibly be a problem. They look like little clear pieces of Jell-O or something. And
like you could eat them.
Well, it's
candy.
it didn't strike me as something that should change my plans about swimming. And I love swimming, so I wanted to go, and so I went. But on the return, I swam down from Kaimana Beach to Queenswall Beach and back. And on the return, coming around the windsock, where there's a little bit of a coral narrows and an outflowing tide, I ran into a whole swarm of these box jellies. I didn't see them. All I felt suddenly were just burning needles injecting into my throat, and it was absolutely horrific. I couldn't believe what was going on. So I did a free dive down to get away from them, and I came back up, and I had a Lycra top on over my Speedo, but everywhere which wasn't covered was immediately stung by these invisible things in the water. I swam again down and came up again, and there was no avoiding it. So I was completely covered with these horrible fiery stings.
Wow, but you're a nice person. Why would they do that to you?
Well, I guess I was in the way. I don't know if it was purposeful.
It's their nature.
I don't know if it was purposeful.
So, I mean, but they, I hate to say this, but they were probably more afraid of you than you were of them. No, well, they weren't thinking about it at all.
Well, now, knowing what I know now, basically this 8 to 10 days after the full moon is a time in which the entire population comes from these offshore sites at different parts along the Hawaiian chain, not just Hanauma Bay or Mamala Bay, Waikiki, but throughout Hawaii. And I happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, with the tide coming out. So I just intersected with this natural population.
Now, what is the purpose of their sting? I mean, is it to just hurt you, to immobilize you, to eat you? What exactly do they have in mind by doing that?
Well, the interesting thing is that the stinging cells have chemosensors and mechanosensors. So even apart from a live animal, they can trigger. And this is the fastest known biological event. So basically at bullet force and bullet speed, these tiny microscopic stinging cells within the tentacles. And there's some nice video I have on my website if you want to see that.
Yeah,
we've done high-speed photography on the microscope to show that. So it's really remarkable. So each of these tiny little stinging cells has an organelle that takes up most of the cell volume. And within that is this mechanical apparatus that's all coiled and ready to go. And it is itself a hypodermic hollow tubule injection apparatus plus venom. So each one of these can pierce through the prey or the unlucky swimmer and inject that venom deep into the tissue. So the point of that basically is to feed. But these tentacles,
What are they-
the fish and invertebrates, little
They weren't going to try to feed on you.
well, they can't tell the difference between a human swimmer and a fish, and basically.
For them, you were just a big fish.
Well, upon contact with a appropriate biological surface, those triggers to fire will go off.
Okay.
So we human beings have a number of those triggers. So I don't think that they were a sinister group looking to ruin my morning, but
They did.
I ignored, prudent warnings, and I was in the way. So, it's kind of on me. But in any event, I ended up sort of wheezing, gasping for air. It felt like my lungs were filling with fluid. And,
Going into shock?
Well, I have been a certified lifesaver and all these things. I've been a swimmer since I was a little kid. So I recognized immediately that I was in real danger because I couldn't breathe properly, and I laid on my back to try to sort things out, but nothing would help. And then there was no one on the beach because it was so early. So I just went into counting strokes and trying to swim towards the beach, but I was being pushed away. So my lungs were filled with liquid, and I was gasping and wheezing. I was in excruciating pain, and I just kept counting strokes to get to the shore.
But how did you really feel? No.
Scared. Very scared.
It's probably something as I'm going to study these creatures. I need to know more about them. I'm going to make a life career out of it.
Well, that was fast forward another 48 hours after being.
So how did the 48 hours go?
Well, I ended up going to the shore doing everything wrong. I stood under a fresh cold water shower, that chain shower on the beach there, and everything just went off far more than it was excruciating to begin
The
with.
cells were still in you.
The undischarged stinging cells are still on the skin, and if you add cold fresh water to that, they fire. So I had that happen, and then I took off the Lycra and had the Speedo under it, and that pressure caused more things to fire. So I had a quarter in my suit, and I walked to the Waikiki Aquarium. There's a phone booth I was going to call my husband to come pick me up, but by the time I couldn't speak. So I tapped on the glass, and the next thing I knew, I was in an ambulance, and I was wrapped with saran wrap and vinegar and all this stuff, and I thought, this is just, not a good morning, not a good day.
Wow, but in a funny way, may I say, perhaps it was.
Well, many years later, actually, I was in Italy showing a world expert a paper I was about to submit for publication, electron microscopy, and I had the fortune to meet the world's leader in electron microscopy of Cnidaria, Massimo Evian in Trieste. And I showed him my paper, and I said, well, do you think there's anything to improve, blah, blah, blah. And he said, oh, no, it's perfect. Submit now, it's great. And then he leaned back in his chair, he started laughing. And I said, I'm sorry. And he says, don't you see the joke? And I said, no. And he said, well, your name. And I said, Angel Yanagihara? He said, no. Alata in Latin means winged ones. So I had told him the sting story. He said they probably specifically picked an angel, a kinsman. But yes, so in some way, there is some dark humor on all of these topics.
Wow, what an experience. Oh my God. Thank you for being so graphic about it.
Oh, okay.
So what did you have to do to, relieve yourself and get healthy?
Well, that's really where I became stimulated to try to do some work on this topic.
Yeah.
I found nothing worked. The lady at the aquarium had suggested that I take a hot shower, which I did, and that felt better, so much so that I signed out against medical advice and drove myself home. But halfway back into Manoa, things came on again, full throttle, even worse.
The toxins are still working.
So by the time I got home, I called my husband frantically, And I didn't want to go to the hospital. I really felt that this was just silly. I don't want to waste ER time with this.
It was the embarrassment factor.
Well, I really felt like, this should be easy to manage. It couldn't be
yeah.
worse than a mosquito or a bee sting, et cetera.
Right.
So I tried all the typical remedies and nothing worked. And that's when I did what they call a literature search to look to see what's been published and is there anything out there that's known, has it been acted on? And basically I found that, modern biochemical methods had not been brought to bear on this problem. So I looked quickly to see if there's a place I could submit a grant proposal.
Yeah, but you never tried old-fashioned urine?
Actually, I did not find that in my
I thought when you
literature
talk about the
search.
typical methodology.
Well, now there's Google, and now one would see that. But at the time, no, I hadn't heard about urine. But I wrote a grant proposal to Hawaii Community Foundation, and that was funded. So that's what started me on this whole path.
Oh, fabulous.
Yeah.
And that was
Nin-
1997.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you're on the path. What inventory do you bring with you to do this work? Biochemistry?
Right. So I have an old school training, Georgetown University. I was ABD, all but dead, as we say, all but dissertation. So I had done all my advanced coursework and basic natural product separation chemistries, HPLC, all different kinds of chemistries devoted towards separating biologically active compounds. And sort of
Perfect.
your biggest challenge is to be given an unknown goo, and your professor tells you go solve that, right? So in fact, this venom was exactly that kind of challenge.
And so, okay, so actually this must have been a great moment we decided, well, anyway, you got the grant.
Yes.
Okay, now I'm going to go get the jellyfish.
Right.
I'm going to figure those suckers out. Query though, I mean, it's just I have to say, it's like the sharks. They come and they eat people. And most recently, there was an attack on a tourist a couple of days ago, or a surfboard, a tourist surfboard. He said, he wants to take it home and frame it in koa, show that he.
Teeth.
All right. We don't do anything about the sharks. It's like, the Hindus and cows in the streets, the same thing. No, they're sacred, kind of leave them alone, don't hurt them. Well, I never saw anybody go after, jellyfish and say, we're going to exterminate those guys. Shouldn't we do that? Because they're really not doing anything for us, are they?
Well, I think the planet Earth could say that about humans.
Well, we're doing a good job at exterminating ourselves.
Okay. To look at your question in big philosophical terms, they are a 600-million-year-old life form. They're basically the oldest complex life beyond sponges on the planet. So I think we're going to come and go, and they're still going to persist. They lived on the planet when it was oxygen deplete, when there were methane and carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, in environments we couldn't possibly survive. So I think going out to exterminate the jellies would certainly not be successful.
We have unknown consequences.
Very well, and because they play such a basal role in the food web, fishes eat them, all kinds of critters eat each other. This food web is a complex dynamic.
Yeah.
It's interesting that the place where they have become this horrible nuisance of levels of 10,000 a month is Mamala Bay, where we've, have the most human impact in this watershed. So we've overfished, we have nutrified runoff, we have depleted turtles. So we've upset the ecosystem, and only in this area have they become so prevalent.
Interesting.
But they are
don't have
offshore
natural enemies anymore,
Kona.
somehow.
They live in balance in the rest of the Hawaiian chain, in Saipan, throughout the tropics in the Caribbean.
Sometimes they come in numbers, though, right?
They do.
Depending on whatever factors.
But I think, again, that's really kind of on us. It's sort of the canary in the coal mine story. We've upset the apple cart, and now suddenly their reproductive success is massively increased, and then we are complaining about them. So
yeah, right. Yeah, well, we're really the culprits.
Well, I think it's a wake-up call.
Yeah. When I was a kid, lived in New York. We had beaches, Rockaway Beach, Long Beach, all that, on the southern coast of Long Island. And once in a while, there were jellyfish there. And they're gelatinous kind. I guess they were all gelatinous. And they were, about 6 inches wide, maybe a little bigger than that. And my parents would say, don't go near them. Don't step on them. They'll bite you good. And of course, you learn to stay out of the water if you see them on the beach, and certainly not to step on them. But query, if you step on them, does the same process happen? They can't sting you if you just step on them, right?
Well, the thing is that
Must feel very oozy, though.
well, we say certain jellies sting or they don't sting. That's just us saying it.
Yeah.
The entire phylum stings. They
Yeah.
all sting something.
Yeah.
A lot of them have apparatus that will only inject and pierce through invertebrate zooplankton, so they don't have the physical strength to pierce our skin. That said, a lot of jellies, if you lay it on your arm, you'll feel a sting, but if you step on them, the thickness of your skin would prevent you from being stung.
Yeah.
So a lot of that is just depending on where you are and what you're talking about.
I'm
what
not doing it
species.
anyway.
Okay.
I want to be clear. Okay, so now you get the grant, you're going to do research. You have to get some jellyfish. Yeah, you have to, because you can't get the toxin without the jellyfish, and you can't do anything to separate the toxin out unless you get the toxin. What do you do?
So my original presumption was that the venom would be a nice, well-behaved aqueous cocktail, as we say, like snake venom. You see on the television, they're milking the snake and droplets come out.
Yeah.
Similarly, cone snails have a venom, and you can get that liquid out and do analysis.
Sitar is doing research on that.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that was my premise. And also the literature had numerous indications that the PET hypothesis was that there was some silver bullet ion channel blocker to be found. So my first Hawaii Community Foundation grant involved getting an aqueous venom from the tentacles and testing on what we call ion channel, ion clamp, TEV, two electrode voltage clamping type of electrophysiology to look for ion channel blockers. So very specific A to B kind of approach. Well, first of all, I found the venom, what people were calling venom in the literature was really not very compelling. So they're taking freeze-dried tentacles, and if you can imagine a freeze-dried rattlesnake, for instance, as a corollary.
Not gonna get much out of that.
And you're going to put that into a blender with dilute saline and call that venom. Well, in the case of the rattlesnake, I think you'd have a hard time convincing people. You might get some biological activity, but you're going to get all sorts of other things in there.
Yeah.
But that was the state of the art for venom, Cnidaria venom. And I looked at that and I said, okay, well,
We're not going to do that.
Well, no,
We're going to find another way.
Well, I started out by doing what others had done.
Okay, but you know what? It's a cliffhanger.
Oh.
Whenever I find a cliffhanger, you know what I do?
What?
I take a break.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Ethan Allen, host of Likeable Science on Think Tech Hawaii. Come join us every Friday at 2 p.m. when I interview interesting scientists about what they do, why they do it, and why we should all care about it. It's a lot of fun to see. We hear, and you can learn interesting stuff. You'll hear all kinds of fascinating science, and we know you'll have a great time. Hope to see you then. Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard. I'm the host of Center Stage here on Think Tech. This show is so very dear to my heart. We talk with artists of various different ilk here about the process that they go through for their art. So we talk about what they're doing, why they are doing it, how they do it. And it's a show that is inspiring. This is what I hear from people all the time. And a show that will teach you something, sometimes something about yourself. I hope you'll join us. The show is Center Stage. It's on Think Tech every Wednesday at 2 o'clock. We'll see you then.
Okay, we're back. We're live. We're finding out about venom. Okay, you know, you can't do venom research without venom. Basic stuff. So, following the cliffhanger, Angel, how do you get the venom out in a modern way, your way? Is your contribution to a new world of research.
All right. Well, I started with the published methods at the time, but I found them to be unconvincing, and the biological activity just wasn't there. So I thought, well, we should certainly be able to do this in a better way. So my approach was to take live animals, freshly caught from the ocean, and to develop a method to isolate these stinging organelles called nematocysts from the tentacles without freeze drying or having anything
Are they very
change.
small?
They're microscopic.
Okay.
So basically, what we devised is a method by which we can take the live tentacles and at 4 degrees refrigerator temperature, slowly rotate these in a specific solution, which allows the tentacle to just retract a little bit, and these nidades fall out intact.
Fool them.
Fool
You
them.
fooled them. It's just like the snail research. You fooled them into giving up their venom.
But the good thing is that the venom is still within the little capsules.
Yeah.
And these capsules are beautiful storage capsules that can last 20s of years, or 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So we can take those stinging cell capsules now that we've purified at 4 degrees without freeze thawing, doing anything unusual, and centrifuge them, pellet them, and then I developed a method to rupture them in mass. So if you can imagine taking 100 dozen egg cartons,
Yeah.
we basically use pressure
Yeah.
to help us. So we drop it from 20,000 psi to 0, and they all rupture rapidly. And then we do a hard spin, and we take that entire stuff. If it were chicken eggs, it would be the eggs, white and yolk, all mixed together,
Yeah.
and we hard spin out the particulate matter,
Yeah.
the shells.
Now you've got the pure chemical.
Now we have the actual content
Yeah.
of the nidade.
Okay.
And it was not at all what I had hoped.
Interesting. Interesting. So, I mean, by using this method of spinning it out, of actually purifying it, you could, it opened, it's Proust. I was telling you before, I knew this was going to be a Proust show. Marcel Proust was a French author in the 19th century, and he wrote a book called Recherche de Temps Perdu. And it was about looking through a keyhole and then sort of taking yourself through it, and you find a whole new world. That's what happened. It's that opened this all up for you. Am I right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So finding that it wasn't this nice, tidy, aqueous, soluble content, but basically it's over 30% lipid. So if you imagine going to the McDonald's, getting a Big Mac, adding a cup of mayonnaise, putting that in your blender under liquefy, that's what you're giving to your gentle biochemist and saying, solve that, all right? So it isn't at all what I had thought I was going to be analyzing, and that requires a lot of ingenuity on the part of the biochemist to separate and analyze the fractions that make up such a complicated mixture.
Yeah. But now,
But now, 18 years later, we can say that we've been able to really interrogate this complex cocktail, and we have done what's called a bioactivity directed purification, which means that you'll separate a complex mixture using one method and then another and another, et cetera, and you get fractions. And each of these fractions you put down through this hot or not assay. Does my artemia live or die? Do the red blood cells of humans have an effect or not effect, et cetera, et cetera. And you get now fractions that have particular properties. So we were able to isolate a particular fraction that in and of itself could recapitulate death in a mouse or of human red blood cell lysis. So we reasoned that
sounds like this has military consequences here.
well, the military does come into the story.
Ooh, okay. All right.
That's another cliffhanger for you. But finding that the locomotive of this complex train, if you will, the fastest acting agent was this pore-forming protein, then in your keyhole led me into another room and another whole dimension of investigation.
Wow, so you could now see the compounds. You could now see, are we down to atoms yet? You could now see exactly what this material was about. You could analyze it right down to the way everything interacted with each other and other things.
Well, the problem with complex mixtures is that we are a long way from the molecular solution of every single constituent, okay? So each constituent would take a career to sort of solve. But for proteins, at least, we can do amino acid sequencing, and then we can do the genetics and pull out the whole protein, and then we can solve them and do modeling. So that's what I did, and others picked up some of my N-terminal sequence and ran with it and did the whole genetic code of these pore-forming proteins, which we found to be the fastest fast-acting agent. So with that information, myself and Dr. Grobar-Watts from PBRC did modeling, and we looked at how these proteins could interact. And then from that, I had another keyhole moment, if you will, to look for ways to inhibit this pore-forming protein.
Oh, wow. So both ends of it. Once you know what it is and how it works, then you can
Right.
address it, deal with it.
So that's the dream. The dream is, the original objective was to be able to determine if there was a single bad actor. There may not be. There may be a number of them that work together, and then you have to knock out each of them. In this case, fortunately, it turned out that this one protein is necessary and sufficient for death. So then you're right. The next step is how do we inhibit that protein or that compound?
This is not GMO stuff now, is it?
No, this is all produced by biology.
So so using biological agents to deal with biological agents.
Exactly.
It's like maybe they neutralize each other in a funny way.
Right.
So maybe you have a little white cream you put on your body when you go out swimming, and what happened before never happens again?
Well, that would be kind of a dream, and in a way, we've sort of accomplished a little bit of that.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, ultimately, the objective is to lessen human suffering and loss of
But
life.
there are other objectives too, aren't
Well,
there? Scientific objectives to understand the universe as we don't know it yet.
Well, I get asked this a lot, and some of the folks in the press want to believe that everything I'm doing is to discover drugs that will solve diseases. And certainly some of what we're doing can do that, but frankly, my perspective is everything I'm doing is geared towards understanding diseases. So we call that pathophysiology. So how is it that a 1 meter sting of a box jellyfish can kill a child in 5 minutes? How does that happen? That's called pathophysiology. And it's interesting that nature doesn't really reinvent herself. And what I found that goes into this pathophysiology of life-threatening stings is very similar to bacterial sepsis. So when one studies it from that end, then the collateral benefit is that things that could be addressing the box jellyfish sting could potentially also address bacterial sepsis. So rather than having the metric of let's discover things to cure cancer and to do this and that and to repurpose for our own good, if one sort of goes at it in a different point of view to learn from the data and to follow this thread wherever it will go, and to have a great tool set in which to do that, then the collateral benefit is that we actually start to understand bigger picture phenomenon.
The physical world way down in there. So at the smaller level. That's really exciting. And ultimately, maybe it will cure cancer, but let's look at the common denominators first.
Yes, so how is it causing death? What are the steps along this pathway? And we have physicians who are geared towards saving lives. You've got somebody in the ER, you're going to deal with symptoms, blah, 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 blah. They do their best, right? And they're sort of informed by a history of research. But without the dedicated, biochemists or whomever the pathophysiology folks are in the laboratory trying to unravel that, the physician is going to have a very limited set of tools available to deal with the symptoms, and they're not going to have the luxury of spending 18 years to try to understand this particular disease state.
It's all about intersections, isn't it? Of different disciplines, multidisciplinary approach to things. You take somebody really, he knows about this but not that, and then that but not this, put them together and aha, there's something else. So what is with the cross appointment to JABSOM? Why JABSOM? I mean, why JABSOM and SOWEST? How does that work?
Well, PBRC Pacific Bioscience Research Center is where I began, and we've recently joined SOWEST. It's a good fit, I think. Mm-hmm. My work, as you sort of allude to just now, is cross-disciplinary. In this sense of doing pathophysiology, I really transit a lot of academic space, if you will, from field ecology, being out there in the ocean at night, collecting animals, getting to know field ecology of jellyfish, to basic biochemistry, to pathophysiology, to medical questions where you have loss of life, 20 to 40 kids a year in the Philippines dying because of these box jellyfish envenomation. And the Department of Defense Special Operation Command combat divers, for instance, contacting me because they have irukandji cases, this life-threatening, potentially career-ending outcome of getting box jellies in their combat uniform as they're dropping out at night doing their underwater missions. So I am engaged in what's called translational research, which is basic research which has a direction
to medical.
for deliverables that are applicable. So translational medicine is one of the focus points of JABSOM. So it's a good fit for me to be one foot in both of these worlds, UH Manoa, SOEST, and JABSOM.
That's great. That's great. I mean, because it's the keyhole after the keyhole, as you said. It just goes out further and further, connects with more things, and the particular applicability could be enormous. Learning our physical world. We have a movie, right? But we're not going to play the movie until we take another break.
Okay.
Okay? You'll see the movie's good too. And by the way, if I had the chance, I would go back and get the movie, the music from Jaws.
Oh.
I'm going to play it just about now.
Okay.
That's Angel Yanagihara at SOEST and JABSOM. Out of the box with box jellies here in Research in Manoa. We'll be right back.
Aloha, this is Keli'i Akina, president of the Grassroots Institute, and I want to thank you for watching Think Tech Hawaii. We are delighted to be partners with Think Tech because it gives us the opportunity to bring to you a show every week on Monday at 2:00 p.m. called Ehana Kako. Ehana Kako means let's work together because we believe that Hawaii will be a better place when everybody works together. And in what way? Well, at the Grassroots Institute, we research 3 basic areas and we invite guests to come on board from across the country, the state, and the nation to talk about a better economy, a better government, a better society. Now, aren't those things we all want? Indeed. If you'd like to have the latest research in terms of public policy, as well as ways in which we can build a better government, economy, and society, then tune in every Monday on Think Tech Hawaii at 2:00 p.m. for our fascinating guests on Ehana Kako. Let's work together. I'm Keli'i Akina with the Grassroots Institute, and I'll see you then. Aloha.
Okay, we're back. We're live. We're here with Angel Yanagihara. Out of the box with box jellies. She's really famous, you know. This is a very famous thing, what you're doing. I'm here with you, and you're talking to me. Wow. Make my day. Anyway, so first we got some pictures. Can we play the pictures and Angel can describe what's going on? Okay, what's this?
This is one of the figures from our recent publication, and we compared different ways to rinse a sting site. So when one comes out of the water right away after a sting, there are a lot of stinging organelles left on the skin called nematocysts that haven't fired. And you can make things worse by choosing the wrong rinse. So in this case, we show on the figure no treatment versus flushing the area with seawater or adding fresh water. Now, you'll remember in my story, the cold fresh water made things worse. Here we show definitely that that's happening in a model that we've designed in our laboratory of human skin, which uses human red blood cells in a optically clear agarose.
You don't use volunteers on this.
No, not on this one. So we compare that with rinsing with vinegar or lidocaine or a new technologies that I have recently patented in my laboratory that's based on years of research. One of the actives in there is copper gluconate. And so we tested copper gluconate alone in just a saline versus isopropanol, ethanol, soda, and urine, Epsom salts, and then the Sting No More spray, which contains copper gluconate and other pharmacologic agents all compounded together into a good spray. So we found that the best rinse as far as improving outcomes is the Sting No More spray, and next to that, a good rinse is vinegar. But we should point out that that figure is speaking to rinsing the area. As far as treatment goes, the next slide, there we are, we compared no treatment with seawater, freshwater, vinegar, isopropanol. Ethanol makes things worse as a treatment. Urine actually made things worse. Epsom salts made it way worse. Hot water improves outcomes. And on the next slide, you'll see the new commercial product, I guess a couple slides further. But anyway, the current practical summary then, based on this 18 years of work, is that the best approach is to avoid them, not like I did, which is to ignore advice and go out there, but to just stay out of the water, or at least wear a stinger suit or full body coverage. If you're stung, research shows that there's potent inactivation of these stinging cells by the Sting No More spray, and then treatment and inhibition of the venom already injected into your skin by this pharmaceutical grade Sting No More cream, which was produced University of Hawaii at Hilo College of Pharmacy, chief pharmacist for a Department of Defense grant. So if one doesn't have the Sting No More spray available, vinegar is a good rinse, but it isn't a treatment per se. Sting No More cream potently inhibits the venom. If one doesn't have that, then hot water immersion partially inhibits the venom. Antihistamines can be useful. Things that aren't good and should not be used are cold packs. They just preserve the venom. They give you a transient illusion of a reduction of pain, but not better outcomes. And do not do what I did, which was stand under the fresh, cold water. Interestingly, hot, fresh water is not a problem. It's the cold, fresh water. Do not scrape the site. EpiPens can be dangerous and life-threatening. Don't use your own EpiPen thinking that this is an allergy. Those are decisions for physicians to make. But if you look online, WikiHow, et cetera, there's all kinds of advice out there. But again, our research recommends, results indicate use of the Sting No More spray, which we've used vinegar with urea as well as other active agents to enhance the effects of vinegar. Number 2, use this cream, and number 3, hot water immersion. And here's a pretty picture of the stingnomore.com website products available that the United States Special Operation Command is now using. All the combat divers have this, and part of our funding required that we commercialize it, so we've created a little website.
Oh, it's dual use then? It's dual use, yeah?
What do you mean by dual?
It means that you get funding and you also have the option or opportunity to sell it commercially.
Well, the funding required a commercialization plan, which the funding didn't include money to do the commercialization plan.
Nice.
So we had volunteer effort from College of Business folks,
good.
so that was all done.
Multidisciplinary, right?
There was no money from the military to commercialize it per se,
okay.
but there's a requirement with public funds to, bring back a contribution to the public good. So we've done that in the most economical way possible, but no, there was no specific funding for that.
Okay, so I can go on stingnomore.com
Yes.
and I can buy some of this, and you have it here.
Yes.
And I can take it to Rockaway Beach and it would work there just as well.
Right.
Anywhere in the world it would work. There's no
Yes.
difference between the jellyfish on Rockaway Beach and the jellyfish here in Hawaii.
Well, there is a difference. The venoms from each of these animals are somewhat different in the biological activity. The box jellies have the most lethal. But it's fortuitous that we started out our work looking at this species, because what we found is that all the other species have lesser versions of this pore-forming protein. So we've sort of overshot the mark here, and we can
Cover 'em
apply
all.
this for the other animals. Yeah.
So this is it. Now, how do you put it on? There's a little sprayer on the top?
Right, so there's different sizes, and this is the so-called beach kit size. And again, this isn't a treatment. This is just the first pass rinse, and then we can just spray it out, and it's a mister. So that you'll smell it. It smells like vinegar. You'll just spray before touching the solution. So it's
Yeah, so it's vinegar. Yeah.
vinegar. There's
Can you use it on salad?
No. So there's no preservatives or colorants or anything in this. It's just the active chemicals and vinegar and urea. And then the next step is this cream, which is called mil-spec because it's for the military. It's negatively buoyant foil packs that they can have in their utilities, and you can actually apply it underwater. And it's a greaseless.
It's a cream.
It's a cream, but it doesn't have grease or oils that would impact their guns and such. So one can apply that even underwater. But we recommend that you first saturate the site with the spray, because that will inactivate any of the undischarged stinging cells, and then prepare the site for the cream. And if one didn't have either of these, then vinegar and hot water. But this works far better.
So actually, the best of all is to use them both, the spray and the cream in that order.
Right, exactly. And what we have actually shown, what we found in our recent studies is that this was devised as a preventative, which is part of what the military wanted. And it works as a preventative, but we don't put that claim in the public space because we don't know how long people will be out there swimming. And I was a diver with Diana Nyad crossing from Havana to Florida, and
90 miles?
110 miles.
Oh, pardon me.
And I was in the water all night long with her each night as a diver. So we actually developed this technology before the military had contacted me based on Diana Nyad's needs, and I had it formulated in anhydrous lanolin for her in that application. But for the current on the market version, we're putting just the claim for treatment of stings because one doesn't know how long the swimmer might be out there. But it does have some protective effect as well.
How long will it last?
Well, that's the thing. So with Diana Nyad, we were applying this to her every 40 minutes as she was swimming and using the anhydrous
Where do you
lanolin.
put all over the body, or just in areas that are likely to be stung?
Well, and in 2012, for instance, she swam through a literal sea of box jellies at night in the Florida Straits, and I was out there with her. So we would apply it on her face, and we had her in Lycra, long sleeve, and booties and such, but kept that on her face and dealt with it.
So this is kind of interesting. It's these, what do you call it, the prophylactic approach. I mean, well, sort of after the fact is what it is. So number one is, this is not going to cause the jellyfish not to sting you. The jellyfish will sting you. And the same process that you described in your experience will happen again. The only thing is that after you're stung, you won't be in as much pain and disability as what happened to you, right? That's it.
Well, the pain scores go basically down to zero.
Zero?
From 10 to 0 to 2 in 7 minutes. So we have a potent inhibitor of the venom, and the long-term outcomes are far better. So this is a magnificent step forward in technology for the treatment of stings. For the prophylaxis, for the avoidance of stings, that's something for a military application only, and we're not going to try to bring that to the public space.
Yeah. Theoretically, they could do it.
Well, theoretically, I mean, we have
Can
done
you buy this too on the website?
Yes. So the website has both the spray and the cream, the stingnomore.com.
If somebody wanted to be really conservative, they could use it like the military would use it. But it sounds like it's kind of a waste if you're not in an area where there are box jellyfish.
Well, it's a waste, and the cost of manufacturing this is pretty high. So it's not the sort of thing that we can put into like a sunscreen. People have said, why don't you just have it in a sunscreen and that sort of thing. We can't really do that. And then there's other downsides to that as well. So as far as prophylaxis for the general public goes, just stay out of the water.
Yeah. So is there any downside to using this? I mean, if I put this on every day for the next 10 days and cover myself with it, would I get a reaction just from this?
Well, you would not be following the directions. So we say no more than 4 packets in 48 hours. So there's no known downside to this. All the ingredients are generally recognized as safe and effective, and we're well within, appropriate doses of these compounds. So, but that said, I wouldn't want to
I wouldn't either.
First of all, it would be very expensive.
What a terrible way to live.
It would be very expensive to do
It smells
that.
like urea, if I didn't make that clear. So what's the next step for you, Angel?
Well, right now I'm actually applying for foreign funding to address this horrible loss of life in the Philippines and the Gulf of Thailand. I went in November and in December, 3 weeks each, to a tiny island in the Gulf of Thailand called Koh Samui, where 6 people have died in just the last 20 months, and then also an area of the Philippines where supposedly 20 to 40 folks die a year, mostly children. And so what we want to do
What are they dying from?
from box jellyfish
Okay.
stings.
Oh, that's
So
serious.
we're lucky in Hawaii that we have very few, if any, deaths due to our box jellyfish. But other parts of the world are not so fortunate. And right now, the state of the care in Thailand, for instance, is, you won't believe this, scraping the site, which actually
Makes
makes
it worse.
far worse. It's not a bee stinger that can come out with scraping. If you look on the British National Health Service, in fact, they'll tell you to scrape it, put shaving cream and scrape it with a credit card. So, I mean, it's unbelievable what's out
All
there
very methodical,
on
of course,
WikiHow.
yeah.
But in Thailand, they recommend vinegar, which is good, but then they recommend scraping and ice packs, both of which we found not to be helpful. So I'm working on collaborating with researchers in Thailand and the Philippines to do these kinds of tests that we've just published here in Hawaii with live tentacles from the box jellies in those areas, and then to test these technologies also.
That's great.
and
You're
then-
performing a worldwide service.
And then we're also working with the Army to develop intravenous treatments for the life-threatening, more acute stings where people are dying within an hour of being stung. And in that kind of a sting, that's going to be beyond the approach of a topically applied
Yeah,
therapeutic.
that'd be a different chemical, different.
But we have been able to save lethally injected mice with these technologies. So we have promised that we will potentially be able to develop better clinical tools for physicians.
One thing occurs to me, though. You talk about say the Philippines or Thailand. This is more tropical, different environment, and I think I hear you saying that the box jellyfish there are a different species, perhaps a more dangerous species. Perhaps their sting is worse. Ergo, all of these deaths and whatnot.
Well, we have over 30 species of box jellies around the world, and our particular species, this Alatina alata, the Hawaiian box jelly, exists in other parts of the world and actually has caused deaths in other parts of the world. So, and I believe in Hawaii even we have maybe had a few deaths, but very rarely. So as you say, there are other species that have a far worse track record for deaths.
But here's my question. So we have climate change. Everybody at research at Manoa talks about climate change. You got to be thinking about it too. So if I take an environment and I raise the water temperature in the ocean, and I get mutations or changes in some way in the jellyfish, could that lead to a more dangerous species, a more dangerous process than we have now?
Well, I don't think we need to invoke mutations at all. But what has been found worldwide is that a lot of these tropical species have increasing ranges. So now some of these life-threatening, horrible stingers from the Indo-Pacific are all the way up into Vietnam. We've had box jellies in Florida now, where they used to just be in the Caribbean.
And that's because of
up
water
to-
temperature change.
So the water temperature speaks to the ranges of certain box jellyfish. So yes, I agree that climate change actually brings more danger to certain higher population areas.
You have miles to go before you sleep, Angel.
Well, there's no immediate end to this research tract, and it's incredibly interesting, and I really have sort of followed the data and not come on it with a preconceived strategy. So innovative and being responsive to the data, I think it's sort of been a lesson to me, the whole investigation.
A lesson in scientific method. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Angel.
you, thank
Been
you.
wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you.
Angel Yanagihara, a heroine at So West and Japsam in the box, out the box with the box jelly.
Thank you.